Hey, what's going on, guys? Jason Frausto for TennisUnleashed.net, and welcome to this complete forehand technique analysis breakdown of 15-year-old Cruz Hewitt. Hewitt is the son of former #1 in the world, Lleyton Hewitt. If you want to see what his forehand technique looks like, stay tuned. It's coming up next. All right, so before we break this down, let's let it play once in real time. Let's see what we got here from Cruz. Left side of the screen and right side of the screen, right? Looks pretty clean for the most part. Let's take a look at where Cruz is at. Again, 12 plus UTR. I think he just had his best win, beating a player ranked around 600 in the world. So he's doing really, really well for his age. When we see that type of success for a player at a really young age, it's usually a very good sign as long as there's no major flaws in their game or anything holding them back. So again, we got Cruz left side here. This is from TennisLegend's YouTube channel, by the way. So check them out and support them over there. And then also over on the right here. One thing that Cruz does that I like to see with most of the players that I train is having the elbow spaced a little bit away from the body right here. Just a little gap between the elbow and the body to help get that elbow away so we can set up that ATP style forehand a little bit later and make it a little bit easier for ourselves. Another thing that we see from Cruz, he grabs the throat of the racket right with his left hand right there in that position. So he's up there grabbing on that, supporting it and helping it turn. Here goes from kind of almost a continental grip position here on the right hand that we see, waiting maybe possibly for a backhand, and switches over right there to the forehand. I'm assuming he's around semi-western. Maybe we'll get a good look at that later in the video. And then what he does, right, he starts to turn his upper body and his hips at this stage of the swing, gets a nice unit turn, starts to really use the body, and then he lets go a little bit early here with the left hand off the throat of the racket. Somebody like an Alcaraz will hold onto that position a little bit longer because he has a position with his right elbow here where he's starting to get a little bit more space. He tends to lift his right elbow up, and his right elbow gets to or around the height of his shoulder right there, right? So we can see that right elbow position, right? Pretty high up in the air at or around the shoulder height at this point of the swing. Because he has that really elevated elbow position, the tip of his racket basically points in a position where it's pointing straight forward essentially at this point, and it's actually a little bit lower than his hand. The wrist isn't in a strong, stable position. This can cause some problems if we're late on balls or balls coming in really fast, but hey, it's working for him at this point, right? It's kind of Frances Tiafoe-esque, and I think a lot of the pro players, they don't really realize whether it's a Kyrgios or a Frances Tiafoe. This really resembles more of a Frances Tiafoe type forehand swing to me. A lot of these guys don't realize the influence that they have on the younger players that are coming up, but these younger guys see these guys and try to emulate them for various reasons, right? So this looks very, very Frances Tiafoe-ish. And just from this position, we can see Cruz continues to finish his unit turn, so his chest is pointing off to the right. His belly button, hips kind of off to the right. He's in a semi-open stance in both forehands here with his feet. And then we can see he's got his front shoulder, so that's his left shoulder, turned a little bit more than his back shoulder, right? So he's got a really good coil of the body. But this part of the forehand here really does look very Frances Tiafoe-ish at this stage of the swing. It's always something they could change down the road if they wanted to, and his results are improving every single week and month. So from here, you can see the arm is very relaxed, the lower part of the arm, and then he gets what I call a tip flip. So the tip of the racket is pointed off to the right of the hitting hand at this stage of the swing. Easier to see on the right side than it is to see on the left side over here, but it's pointed off to the right here. And then what happens is as he relaxes the wrist and starts to uncoil his body, the tip of that racket is going to end up behind his hitting elbow, which is a large tip flip, similar to what like Jannik Sinner gets. Sinner, we know, biggest hitter on tour, forehand and backhand basically combined at this point. So he's a good model to emulate. But a lot of these guys kind of have some of these components of his forehand as far as this tip flip goes. So really large tip flip position there. Another thing we see in this position right here, guys, before he drives the racket, from the tip flip position, you can clearly see right here, pretty much has that semi-western, strong semi-western forehand grip position. So it looks like his heel pad of his hand right here is on the fourth bevel. Again, very standard at this point. very Yannick Sinner-ish in terms of the grip position, but really important to see that, hey, another guy on the tour with a semi-Western forehand grip. We don't tend to see a lot of guys out on the tour at this point that have Eastern forehand grips. I'm not saying it's not possible, but the trend is definitely towards heavy semi-Western forehand grips or grips that are between the third and fourth bevel, around 3.5 on the forehand side. But Cruz here definitely, again, using a semi-Western forehand grip. And then from that position, we can also see his right leg is loaded, right? A lot of weight and body weight on the right leg. But then from that position, from the right leg, he's going to start to take that right leg, and we watch this here, and it's going to straighten out a little bit as he explodes off of the court, right? So pushing from the ground, using the ground force to push and rotate and hit a really offensive and aggressive shot. So again, tip flip, rotates the body. So his belly button that was pointed off to the side a little bit more before is now going to start to rotate and point more towards the net at contact. A couple of really big keys that we see with Cruz's forehand, things that I look for with high-level players. His elbow, hitting elbow, a little bit in front of his waist at contact. There are exceptions to that. Primary exceptions are going to be if you're hitting inside out. Sometimes that elbow position will be further back. Or if you're hitting a really defensive forehand where you're backing up, you'll be a little more jammed. That's pretty natural to happen on those shots. But from here, the other keys besides that big tip flip that we see at contact with the ball, he has very good separation between his elbow and his body, so we know he's not jammed by the ball. He's going to have optimal power on this shot. The shoulders a little bit tilted down. The racket, tip of the racket from his hand, also angled down a little bit, so we know he's hitting with a good amount of topspin on the shot. Talked about this a little bit in a different video, but if we see the hand and racket kind of even across instead of tilted down like this, we know the shot's going to be a much flatter ball than a spinnier ball. So Rublev does that quite a bit here and there. But again, really here, nice tip flip, unloads the leg, especially for a young guy. He's hitting the ball really, really well. And then that spacing, the gap here, everything looks very good here with the contact being out in front of the body. Again, belly button now facing the net, and also his shoulders and his chest are now rotated towards the net. And then from here, one thing I like to see from players too, if they really load in this semi-open stance or really load their legs, is the weight shifting from the right side of the body over to the left foot. And he really does that. Does a great job of shifting his weight from the right to the left foot as he goes around and smacks his forehand. A couple other really big keys here, guys, besides this at contact, right? You're going to see his hitting hand here. He gets some extension of his hitting hand as he wipes across the ball. So we don't want to just wipe across and do only that on every single forehand. You won't get the penetration that you want. You can see his hand, right? Look at that hand. Goes out and through the ball as it's going across and making that wiping motion. So that helps give you that drive through the ball and a little bit of depth. So again, look at that hand as it goes out and across and lifts. And then he really wipes and shows his racket strings to, I think that's Jordan Thompson on their side and his dad on the right side. He's hitting against 2-on-1 here, but really wipes across and shows the strings as he finishes. Last couple things as we look at the finish here, we've got that big shift in the weight from the right leg over to the left leg, right? And then also we can see that his belly button just doesn't finish by pointing at the net. It actually goes further than that, right? And goes more and rotates more. It's almost pointing off to the left net post at that point. And again, here you can see that big rotation. We can see his back pointing to the right side. These are all standard check marks and checkpoints for things that we want to see on a super high level forehand. So really good stuff here from Cruz. The only possible concern, right, is this kind of a Tiafoe clone right here in the beginning. It looks very much like Francis's, so maybe that's what inspired a little bit. Maybe somebody looked up to quite a bit on the tour and really wanted to copy that, but definitely a Tiafoe effect there in the front. Everything else looks very, very standard with the forehand side. All right, guys, that wraps it up for this complete analysis and technique breakdown of Cruz Hewitt's forehand. If you found this video helpful or you feel like you learned something today, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. I'm Jason Frausto for TennisUnleashed.net. I'll see you next time.